So if you think about how the result came in, it was really the tightest selection we've been involved in since 2011. 2007, I remember, was also tight, and the exit poll put us ahead, and then we were actually behind. So what we need to do as a political party, as a political grouping, is ensure that the way that we govern now doesn't lead us at the end of a fourth term to the same conclusion to which it led the GSD. And we're very keen, therefore, to listen to what the issues have been in this election for people, how those issues have come about and how we fix them. And therefore, in spreading the portfolios and creating the regional responsibilities that I've created, what I want to do is to ensure that we are constantly hearing the voice of those who have issues with the government. Sometimes people have issues with the government because the government is doing the right thing, and there's no alternative but to continue to do that thing which is right for the whole, for Gibraltar as a whole, despite the fact that you might alienate some people and therefore might lose their vote. But in many instances, what I found when I've gone around the estates, both when I'm doing my CM on location clinics and when we've been doing the hustings, when we get the chance to get out more, is that some of the things that people have complained about, I wasn't even aware of were going on. Or perhaps if I had been aware of them, I hadn't realized the consequence that they were having on the ground. And that's both on the shop floor or in the place where people live. So there are issues which have related to how government offices have been dealt with, vacancies, investment in people, etc., and issues which have been environmental in regions. And so I want to ensure that in the way that I've spread the portfolios, where I have to balance, once again, having 9 ministers. I've been running with 9 ministers since Gilbert Ligudi went to the backbench in 2020, I think. And the fact that we have now got 1 minister less in Parliament, 1 member less in Parliament. So I have to balance all of the portfolios across 9, and also in a way that's going to enable those 9 to reach out, myself included, have all of the information that we need to be a better government. Now, if you ask me, which has been your best government of the last 3 terms, I would say, look, my best government has been the government from 2019 to 2023. No disrespect to those who formed part of my earlier governments. Neil Costa, for example, a brilliant minister from 2011 to 2019.
Yeah, there was only one change, wasn't there?
Yeah, but the thing was COVID. The thing was COVID. The thing was really the ramping up of the Brexit negotiation. That made us, very committed to delivering on those key issues. When you deliver on key issues which are less key but no less important to people, fall by the wayside. So for us, the discipline now is to say, right, in this 4th term, we deliver this safe and secure UK-EU treaty as long as it is safe and secure, because I guarantee I won't bring it back if it's not safe and secure. But we also ensure that we're doing everything we have to do at every other level also, and with the reality that we have a new manifesto and new people, which are also therefore new energy and new ideas on how to deliver against the manifesto. And I'm very keen to show Gibraltar that we've listened. It hurts a bit that after having worked so hard, the other side have come so close, in particular because I think they haven't worked particularly hard as an opposition. They haven't fought like we fought from 2007 to 2011 with the energy and the dynamism that we put into taking over government. But that hurt is there to be understood and rationalized into improvement in the way that we do things and the way that we deliver for the boss, the general public, the electorate in Gibraltar. That's the boss, and we will deliver to the boss in the best way that we can, having heard why the boss wasn't so happy.
Well, one of the criticisms I think that we heard over and over again was the lack of transparency of the government, or that there should be more transparency. Your response was always that there's been more transparency than ever before, but clearly not to the satisfaction of the electorate or the opposition party. So I think one of your endeavours is to bring more transparency. One of the first things that you announced was that you're going to publish the government accounts as from the 1st of April, or from April next year. Let me just ask you first of all, how far back will those accounts go?
To the inception of each company.
Right, okay.
So let's be very clear. When you do a company's annual accounts, you build on the accounts of the year before. The opening position is the closing position of the year before. So all of those accounts will be published, because you cannot publish the latest set of accounts if you haven't got the earlier set of accounts audited. Now, In some instances, the audits may not be completed, but we'll publish them unaudited, subject to audit. And I've set the date of the 1st of April because that's the date when the financial year starts for the government. Now, different government companies, like companies in every group, might have different dates when their accounts are filed, because with a company you can choose the date. I mean, if you start your company on the 1st of July, that'll be the date on which your annual accounts have to be finished. But I've said the 1st of April is the date where all of the company accounts for the government will be put up on the government website. You'll be able to see them all. Now, of course, I feel very hard done by in this context because the GSD never published their accounts except for 1 year. And now what they did, which was not publish accounts for the government companies, seems to be something that is somehow wrong if we don't do it. This is the duality of the GSD's approach. They say one thing in opposition and they do a different thing in government. And then when they're back in opposition, they go back to picking up the machine gun of allegations against government, even though you're doing more than they did in government in terms of transparency. But look, if people are going to be led by an opposition into thinking that there's somehow something wrong there, and there isn't something wrong. And hang on, let me just finish. And there isn't anything wrong. Why not publish? And frankly, look, I start from the premise that frankly the public should see everything, because you look at what we did with our laws. We have a rule now that all documents should be open to the public, not just after 20 or 30 years. If there is a reason why those documents should remain confidential for a period, they must, of course, but otherwise, we don't have a time limit on when you can see government documents. They belong to you. They belong to the public. They don't belong to me. There are data protection issues, of course. There are issues about relationships between states and diplomacy. All of those issues which sometimes mean, well, you can't really open that document up for a few years. But otherwise, it belongs to the public. And with the government company accounts, where we know there are no issues, but because we've been observing a rule that was put in place by the GSD, in effect, not to publish company accounts. We are being blamed by the GSD. The irony of this is just twisted, honestly. And people have thought or been led to believe that there's something wrong. But look, bugger it, publish and be damned, because this information should be in the public domain.
But it could have been done years ago.
It could have been done years ago by the GSD. And it could have been done years ago by the GSLP Liberals. Now it's become such a big issue. When there is nothing at the core of it, let's publish. And let people see, let people now judge the criticisms that were being made by the GSD, and let them see the full extent of company debt and company assets, the full extent of liabilities and the full extent of assets. Because look, we've had a general election campaign where the GSD have been talking about the debt of the government companies grossed up with a pencil without any indication of how much has been repaid, what has been repaid, what has been used, what has not been used, right? They've just grossed everything up, and that is frankly gross, right? Because it doesn't tell you the real picture. You will know in your home that, okay, you get a loan from the bank. You might not draw down on the whole of the loan. You might draw down on the whole of the loan. The minute you draw down, you start repaying, and the debt starts to come down. And the value of your home, if it's a mortgage, when you buy the home for $1 million, for example, might be $1 million, but 3 years later, your mortgage is down to 800,000 because you've been repaying against it, and your home is worth 1.5. So we can't allow, once again, that the people of Gibraltar should be spooked, as they were by, in my view, the GSD in the context of this general election, to think that there is an issue with company debt. So let's publish the company accounts, let's look at all the liabilities and all the assets of the companies and see just how well we're doing, and then let's have the moment with the GSD where they have to accept that it's a GSLP Liberal government that is publishing accounts of companies every year, and the GSD government that didn't publish those accounts, despite the fact, and this is just the final irony in this argument, that the GSD actually legislated to require every company to publish its accounts. So by law, when the GSD were in government, everybody in Gibraltar who owned a company had to publish their accounts, including the GSD government that had pledged to do so when they were in opposition, and they were the ones who failed to do so and broke their own laws in that respect. This was really quite remarkable.
I'm just going to ask you one very quick question before we move on. There's only one person in the current GSD lineup who was there pre-2011, Edwin Reyes.
I'm afraid you're wrong in that that question, and I have to pick you
I
up on
haven't
it.
asked you it yet.
Yeah, you have.
Do you know what I'm going to ask?
Well, you have, because you prefaced the question by saying there's only one person who was there before 2011.
Yeah.
In fact, the leader of the GSD was there between 1996 and 2003.
Yes, he'd left and he'd gone to the PDP.
Yes, but it was the GSD opposition, which included Keith Asopaldi, that pledged to publish the company accounts. It was the GSD government with Keith Asopaldi as a minister that legislated that all company accounts should be published by law. And it was the GSD with Keith Asopaldi in it that between 1996 and 2003 failed to do that, and then with Edwin Reyes in it, also continued to do that. So they have two people there who have that record that has to be looked at. We have one person in the GSLP Liberals who was in the 88 to 1996 GSLP government, and that doesn't stop the GSD from attacking us in respect of things that happened between 88 and 96. So once again, this is the point I have to make. What is good for the goose has got to be good for the gander. If we want to just look forward, let's just look forward. But if we're going to look back to 88 and 96 because Joe Bossano is in my government, then of course we're going to have to look back at what the track record of Keith Asopaldi is between 1996 and 2003 and Edwin Reyes, not just Edwin, who was responsible for less relevant portfolios in the time that he was a minister.
The election, I'm just going to ask you about the election, was obviously took a lot out of everyone who took part on both sides. And I can see from speaking to you that it's still very much with you. I just want to ask you about your overall, coming out of that election. Obviously, you're happy you've won the election, but what is the thing that stung you the most? Is it the issue about the government accounts? Is that the one that really got to you? No,
I think there's a perniciousness about the way that the GSD conducted their campaign, and it is typical of what we saw in '96. Keith is the common denominating factor there. I'm not saying that you're corrupt, but I'm saying that there's a perception of corruption. So even if you're perfectly honest, people might, after hearing me, think that there's a good reason to perhaps wonder whether you are honest. There's a perception that you're doing things in a particular way, and I exploit that perception against you in a way that affects your reputation and sullies your reputation, where I might actually accept that there's no reason for that. And then I'm going to talk about you being a liar. Even though you say that it's fundamental to you that you don't lie, I'm going to say that you're a liar. I'm going to put the word lie all over my manifesto, and I'm going to say that you have issues with the truth. And look, Ros, since the day that I became Chief Minister, it has been my obligation to represent the people of Gibraltar and to represent to the people of Gibraltar what is happening in government. I have never once misled or been dishonest or lied to the people of Gibraltar. I have always told the people of Gibraltar the truth, sometimes very hard truths, but I've told them the truth. And what hurts is that having spent 12 years of my life discharging those functions as honestly as I can, being not just honest in terms of telling the truth, but honest in the day's work that I do, and I know that's also true of my ministers, to have spent 4 weeks being vilified and being called anything less than honest. And then when we say a truth about one of the candidates against us, we are told that that truth is untrue, when in fact it's empirically provable, because we're talking about pounds, shillings and pence on a phone bill, and that we are being toxic and dirty for telling the truth when we are being told ourselves that we are liars, etc., with no proof whatsoever. And when you press and say, well, it's just that there's a perception that although you are perfectly honest and you're not corrupt, there's a perception, and we're going to exploit that. Look, that grates, because that's, I think, what turns people off politics. And we do the politics of truth. For us, the sword of truth is the most powerful weapon in politics. That's why when we talk about things that a candidate for the other side has said, or when we talk about things that a candidate for the other side has done, we know that what we're doing is dealing with the truth. And people need to know the truth when they're coming to elect people into Parliament. Are you happy completely with how you ran your campaign? For example, there was criticism on the other side about bringing up Andorra when Keith Asopaldi had repeatedly said he didn't think it was a model for Gibraltar. I mean, could they level the same sort of criticism at your party? Nonsense. Look, the only thing that I have attacked Mr. Asopaldi with in the context of Andorra are the words that he wrote. The words that he wrote. He doesn't like to hear me quote his words at him. He doesn't like to be reminded by me that when he was Deputy Chief Minister, the Chief Minister of the GSD government said that Andorra might be a model for solution of Gibraltar in the future that he might recommend. Now, Keith Azabali's response to that is it wasn't GSD policy. Well, look, if I make a statement as Chief Minister of a GSLP Liberal government, which goes to the fundamental issue of Gibraltar's existence, its sovereignty, and that statement is not a statement of GSLP Liberal policy, I can assure you that the Deputy Chief Minister and other ministers would immediately respond and I would be ousted as leader. Keith Azabali didn't even raise a whisper in 2002. That's why he threw back the article at me at the leaders' debate, because he didn't want to see it. The words I used, this is why I'm talking about the sword of truth. The words I used were his words. Those are the words he didn't want to be reminded of. And they contradict his later words that he doesn't believe that Andorra is a model for Gibraltar. Now look, I accept that he might have changed his position. I accept that he might still think the same thing, but he might not want to tell us. I accept that in a general election, somebody who has written those things about Andorra in the past is going to find it very difficult to persuade the public to vote for them unless he disavows them. So he's going to disavow them. But it doesn't mean that it's dirty politics or somehow wrong to remind somebody of his very words. I don't think that's unfair, because I'll have my words thrown at me a million times. On debt, for example, because Azabali spent much of his campaigning reminding people of what I'd said in my party political broadcast of 2011. Obviously, he thought it was good enough that he watched it a million times. I didn't complain that he was using my words. I explained why debt had to grow because of COVID, etc., when we are on our way to actually delivering on my commitment in 2011. I don't think that is somehow a reason not to think that the GSLP Liberal campaign was not actually one of the best campaigns you've ever seen. And if the GBC poll was right when you announced at the beginning of the campaign that we were going to lose the election, then my goodness, we've run an excellent campaign. We've turned it around.
There was only like 3 votes in it or something at the first poll. I mean, it was always too close to call, to be fair. But look, I don't want to get into debt because I am going to be speaking to Minister Bossano afterwards anyway. Just one line on that though. Are you satisfied, because that was one of the issues, 1.9 billion gross debt. Are you satisfied that Gibraltar's debt is manageable?
100%. And I'm very disappointed that they've tried to use this issue again as something with which to scare the electorate to vote for them. And we try to inspire the electorate to vote for us, not scare them.
Okay, going back to the portfolios, I want to ask you, you've taken on ITLD and digital services. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yes, because I think those two now need to come together. I mean, the digital services portfolio was created in order to really move forward with the creation of that interface between the public and the government in a digital format. ITLD had to run all of the IT and logistics for the government. Now, I think that has been created. It needs to come into the control of ITLD. We need to refine how it's done. Albedislo, I think, has done a fantastic job. We finally have on our phones with biometrics the ability to interface with the government. But this is Gibraltar Digital 1.1. And I want to now use these next few years to move to Gibraltar Digital 2.0 or 3.0 so that interface really becomes very useful to the public. And although we will have counters open within a few days, those counters which were not open will be open within a few days. I want less people to want to go to counters because they're able to do things within the comfort of the palm of their own hand.
You've also taken back broadcasting. Is there a particular reason for that?
Well, simply because we have to divide up the portfolios of those who are no longer ministers, and Albedislo had digital services and ITLD and broadcasting, so broadcasting is coming to me. You know, I'm a great fan of GBC. I've delivered more investment for GBC than ever in its history, and there are more people working for GBC than ever in its history. So I look forward to seeing the national broadcaster prosper, flourish, and comply with its duties and obligations to give us always an unbiased view of what is happening, whether it's minutes before polls close or minutes after.
On the distributional portfolios, it's very notable that some of your ministers, Gemma Arias Vasquez, Christian Santos and Nigel Feetham, have taken on a huge amount of responsibilities in comparison to some. Is that reflective of your opinion of their ability to...
No, it's not, and I think it's very unfair to try and make a judgment about a person in that way. I mean, Gemma Arias has been involved in business for many years. She was the chairwoman of the GFSB. She's been a partner at Hassan's. She was running the Better, Stronger In campaign, so she has the qualities to run business portfolios in Gibraltar. She's explained herself why she had an interest in the health portfolio. Nigel Feetham has been an expert in financial services, gaming and taxation for many years. If you have an expert in those fields, and in fact in Nigel Feetham I don't have an expert in those fields, I have a genius in those fields, of course I'm going to deploy him there and not elsewhere. So I think it's very unfair to say just because you haven't given financial services and taxation to John Cortez, it doesn't mean that he's a less able person than Nigel Feetham. Well, John Cortez, as you all know, is perfectly able and is able to do anything that you ask him to turn his hand to. But if you've got a genius in that field, you ask the genius to discharge that function.
John Cortez has quite a lot as well, but okay, so you've explained that it's not that you think that they're more able, it's just that's their area of expertise.
Let me give you an example. Patul Fila has housing, really, just housing and the University of Gibraltar, right? But in housing, we're going to deliver almost 3,000 units. It's one thing, but it's a huge responsibility because that is going to require, and you may have seen from her portfolio that for the first time, the Minister for Housing actually has responsibility for the development of affordable housing and the development of rental housing. Those commitments have usually been dealt with at number 6 Common Place because they engage principally public finance, but they also engage planning. So I'm asking Pat to do the planning and I'll do the financing aspects of it. She's just got housing. But imagine the job it's going to be just to do housing, because it's very clear from our work in the past few weeks that housing and employment are still the key issues. Not unemployment. There are people who are in employment who want to better themselves in employment, and that's a key issue that we're going to have to concentrate on, in particular areas of supported employment. And another key area is housing. It's fundamental. There are lots of people who are waiting too long for a rental home, waiting too long for affordable homes because we had the difficulties that we had. Again, it's not something that if you'd had a GSD government before us would have been fixed or fixable, because they too would have crashed against COVID and Brexit and the negotiations. So don't make the mistake of looking at one word in a portfolio assignment and think, there's only one word here, there are 20 words there. That means that this person can do more than this one. This one word is enough to put into, to pale into comparison all of the others.
Let me just ask you about how the constituencies are going to work, because people have been talking about it. Okay. So you have, let's say, a constituency for the South District, a constituent MP for the South District. Is the intention to have regular meetings, booking appointments? Is it issues related to the South District in particular, or I might have, let's say, an issue related to any one of the ministries? Is it a centralised way of accessing government? So, I mean, how's it all going to work?
It's all of those. It's all of those. In other words, ministers will be out and about in those districts. And when ministers are out and about, they're a magnet for people to talk to them. They'll talk to them about the district, they'll talk to them about their personal problems, they'll talk to them about problems with other ministries. Those ministers can then feed into the relevant ministries the issues that they've had from a constituent, so that that department can deal with it, so that I can be aware of issues in the particular area. We will potentially also put out email addresses for each of those areas. If you want to see the minister for your area about issues relating to your area, you'll be able to do so. But more than anything else, it's about having ministers out and about in those areas, continuing the contact that we've established during the hustings, developing it further, and not just about doing clinics in those areas, because I'll still be doing my chief ministerial location, I'll still be doing my clinics here. You can have clinics with ministers in that area as well, but it's about, the reality of life. It's all about human contact in the end. If you don't have human contact, you break down that communication, which enables you to better understand what's affecting the person, not just that you are wanting to hear, the person that you work for, because the ministers work for the public. And that's what we want to do, to have that interface as a very fluid way where people can more easily contact government and be in touch with government through the person of a minister.
Sorry to bring back politics.
It's all right, that's my job.
The election, but to end on a slightly lighter note, you said on the night that you won that you would like the 4 top candidates who've been in politics for 30 years or so, yourself, Damon Albaicino, Keith Hesapadi and Joseph Garcia, to go out for a drink. Have you booked the drink yet?
Not yet. We haven't spoken. It was a rough night, and I understand that not winning is hugely disappointing. I commiserate with them. I've lost elections too. I understand it's difficult. I imagine that there are issues now on the GSD side as they do their own post-mortem and they look forward to where they're going. But look, apart from Mr. Sopaldi, Mr. Albaicino, Mr. Garcia and Fabian Picardo, the Chief Minister, there's also Keith, Damon, Fabian and Joseph. And we started 32 years ago And who'd have said that the journey could have brought us to the top of the table?